Interested in learning about wine, but not sure where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. I'm your host, Haley Bowman, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm a wine enthusiast turned wine educator and founder of the Seattle-based wine tasting business, Cork and Fizz. It is my goal to build your confidence in wine by making it approachable and lots of fun. You can expect to learn everything from how to describe your favorite wine to what to pair with dinner tonight, and so much more. Whether you're a casual wine sipper or a total cork dork like myself, this podcast is for you. So grab yourself a glass and let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. Today, I have a special episode for you. This was actually inspired by a recent Cork Crew tasting. We actually did a tasting about Ukrainian wine. And yes, I said Ukrainian as in the country of Ukraine makes wine. It's kind of crazy. They've been making wine for a very long time, just haven't really been in the mainstream wine world. And their wines have also not really been available, especially in the US, until recently. And that's what actually inspired me to do this tasting for my Cork Crew. So if you didn't know the Cork Crew, this is my virtual wine tasting club. We get together twice a month. Once we do a virtual tasting where I teach everybody about unique styles of wine from different regions from all over the world. We always taste at least 2 wines, either from the same region or maybe they're the same varietal, but from different countries. We always like to do like an exploratory tasting. And then the other event's always like a community event, either a Q&A with people from the wine world, or I'll put together a workshop or event for us to do. But for that first tasting every month, it's always the first Saturday, unless something's going on. But I always plan these every 3 months. So you kind of like know what the quarter is going to look like. And typically the way that I do this is I go check out my partner's website, my partner that provides the wine for these tastings. You don't have to purchase from them. You can join the Cork Crew being anywhere in the world, and you can buy your wine wherever you'd like. But I always like to offer this box of wine as an option if you want the wines delivered for the tasting. So anyway, I always start with them because I'm always just like, let's see what they have available. A lot of times I can ask them to find something for me if I have something in mind, but I was just like, maybe let's see if I can get inspired here. And sure enough, I certainly was, because I was taking a look at some of their new things in. I was like, hold up. Did that say Ukraine? And then I saw a couple more and I was like, this has to happen. Though I did double check with the Cork Crew. Like, I went onto the Facebook group that everybody's in and I'm just like, yo, Ukraine is an option for an upcoming tasting, but you would likely have to buy the wine like really far in advance, or at least directly from this partner. It's going to be a little bit harder to find, but like, do y'all want to know about Ukrainian wine? And it was like, I was going to say anonymous. That's not right. What is it when everybody agrees? I can't think of the darn word. But you get it. Everybody was like, hell yeah, we want to learn about Ukrainian wine. So it came up and we just had the tasting. It's probably been a little while from when you're listening to this, but from when I'm recording, we just had it the past weekend. And so I thought this would be a perfect topic for the podcast. I love getting to introduce you to new styles of wine in areas that you may not have heard of before. And so, yeah, we're going to talk about Ukrainian wine. I'm not going to go over everything that we talked about in the Cork Crew. If you want to hear everything, come join the Cork Crew. Every Cork Crew member gets access to all past recordings of tastings. So you have, I think it's nearly 3 years worth of content to go through, and you can, watch these recordings whenever you would like. So come join the Cork Crew, get access to all those recordings. Plus, you can actually like taste the wine with me, which I think is the best part about learning about new wine regions. But anyway, you should definitely still listen to this podcast because you're going to learn some fun things about a totally new wine region. All right, you know where we have to start. We got to start with some history. So, like many wine regions that we don't necessarily think of right away when it comes to making wine, Ukraine does have a long history of making wine. It goes back to, there are a couple different differing opinions on this, but from what I can see, the 8th century BC, where they found grape seeds in these clay amphora, which are basically these like big clay pots. They're still used today, but they found some grapeseed in these amphora in modern day Crimea, which is in Ukraine. So that does make historians believe that they made wine all the way back then. And winemaking has been a part of Ukrainian culture for many years after that, reaching a peak in the antique period between the 7th and the 3rd century BC, and also booming during the 12th century AD with the monks making wine in their monasteries. In the 19th and 20th century, so I mean, we're skipping forward quite a bit, there were beautiful vineyards growing all over Ukraine in the south, north, east, and west. Of course, things drastically changed after the First World War with the occupation of the Soviets. I've noticed this is a pattern in a lot of, wine regions that have a long history but aren't super well known for making wine these days. A lot of times it's a political reason. It has nothing to do with the quality of the wine and purely things that were going on in politics during war, who had control of the land, all of that stuff. So during this time, they went a different course and where they started to produce a large amount of wine, focusing on quantity over quality. Plus, you had in 1985 to 1987 going in the opposite direction. Over 80% of the vineyards in Ukraine were eliminated as part of the anti-alcohol campaign that was initiated by President Gorbachev. Hundreds of thousands of hectares of vineyards were destroyed, and many believe that there were a lot of unique local varieties that were lost forever. So, after Ukraine voted for independence in 1991, their winemaking industry began to transform and recover from both this anti-alcohol movement and, of course, that idea of just making as much wine as you can for as little money as possible. So, since the mid-2000s, there have been a new wave of winery. These include Chateau Chizé, Chabot, Colonist, and Bécuche Winery, among many others. Now, of course, there are plenty of other challenges that Ukraine has hit past this independence. We have the occupation of Tavria in Crimea, and this was in 2014. A lot of the historical wineries were located in this region, so the wine market lost a significant part of its land, unique terroirs, grape varieties, and sales market. However, at this time, there are more and more wineries that are emerging, ready to experiment with new varieties, technologies, and terroirs. And of course, going in the complete opposite direction of when they were occupied by the Soviets, they are now focusing on quality over quantity. So they're doing things like harvest control to get richer concentration of taste and aroma. No sugar added here. It is the natural grapes and what they are doing in the vineyard that is creating the wine. Just a quick reminder, if you are not on my mailing list yet, what are you waiting for? I would love for you to join. When you do, you'll get a free shopping guide that has 15 of my favorite wines under $15. Head to corkandfizz.com, scroll down to the bottom, and there'll be a little section where you can join the mailing list. I send out a weekly newsletter filled with wine tips, recommendations, special offers, and so much more. Now, let's get back to the show. There is also an increase in local consumption of wines, just with this desire to have more local products, whether it's drinking, eating, or just other supplies around the house. So this has been really beneficial to the Ukrainian wine industry. One thing we definitely have to talk about is the war impact on the winemaking world. Obviously, the war has had a major impact on Ukraine and continues to do so. What's interesting enough is that obviously there's nothing good that can come from this war, but the international exposure has become a lifeline for Ukrainian winemakers during this difficult time. It has caused a heightened interest from both new and returning customers. So there are stories that tell of resilience and hope, offering a glimpse into the promising future of Ukrainian wines when they don't have a war to be dealing with at the same time. As Ukrainians brace for an uncertain future, This is kind of like those miraculous bright spots where they are getting to show their wines off to the world. Since the Russian invasion, 35 new wineries have popped up, some having relocated out of the conflict zones, making up for a total of 160 wine producers throughout the country of Ukraine. Of course, this war has brought a lot of devastation and danger to these wineries. There is the historic Prince Trubetskoy winery. This was heavily damaged by Russian bombs, and the vineyards remain full of landmines, so they can't even go in and fix it up or do anything to bring it back right now. I believe they are currently raising money so that they can rebuild at some point, but that's not an option right now. There are also a lot of wineries right on the border of the front lines, and many people who typically would work in the wineries, whether they are the winemaker and founder themselves. We'll learn about somebody later on who fits that, or just people who'd work in the winery who are on the front lines. So, like I said, I think this is a good area. Of course, there are lots of probably more important things to talk about when it comes to Ukraine, and this should still be a topic on people's minds. But if there's one thing we can do from a wine perspective is support them in this way and continue to talk about Ukraine, whether it be about the war or about the wines, I think we should do it. So I'm glad to get to be able to highlight this country and this region right now. Okay, one thing that always helps me when learning about a new wine region is thinking about the geography and what does it look like on a map. So I'm going to link a couple maps that I found from some great websites on Ukrainian wine, but I'm also going to talk about it a little bit for you. So most winemaking regions in Ukraine are towards the southern edge, with one in the western part of the country. The area is kind of in central Ukraine around Kiev, and then also in the east. Those are more occupied regions in the east, but then also the other areas are just kind of more up and coming. So you're primarily looking in the south and a little bit in the west. There were officially 6 wine regions in Ukraine. These were delineated since Soviet times, but they're pretty much deemed outdated. So instead, we're going to go off of the regions that were created by the promotional body Ukraine Wine Company UK. They prefer to categorize the country's land under these regions, which I'm going to go west to east here. So there's Zarkarpatia, it's the one in the furthest west. Then you're going kind of more in the southern region along the Black Sea. You have Bessarabia, and then the Black Sea region. This includes 3 smaller subregions, Odessa, Mykolaiv, and Kherson. And then you have Crimea, which is just actually south of Kherson, not further east. And then the furthest east region is, this one's a lot harder. And I know I'm not saying all these correctly. I'm very sorry. I tried to look up as best I could. But this last one, the furthest east, is Zaporizhzhia. A lot of Z's in that one. But just to give you a little bit more information about kind of some of the more well-known regions, or at least the ones that seem to be producing wine that is making it to the US and making it outside of the Ukraine. So the Black Sea region is one of them. This is one of the southern regions. It is, not surprisingly, right along the Black Sea and includes the regions of Odessa, Mykolaiv, and Kherson. There are a large number of salty estuaries, bays, lakes, and most of the territory is covered with steppes, and the rest is washed by the Black Sea. So you are going to get a lot of minerality in these wines coming from the Black Sea region. This is also where you are going to find one of the wineries that is currently importing into the US, and the winery that I got to try wines from, which is called Baykush Winery. This is a family-owned winery. They're located on the Black Sea coastline region near Odessa, which was actually attacked in the first days of the war. They're only about 2 kilometers away from the occupied area. I was actually reading an article, and there's a quote in there from the CEO of Baykush, Svetlana Tizbak. She's also the head of the Ukrainian Craft Winemaker Association, and she said it was just too dangerous to leave the winery for the first few months of the war. They have now since resumed work in the vineyards. I believe this quote was taken in February of 2024, just to kind of give you an idea based on when you're listening to this. But they have since resumed work in the vineyards and adjusted to a new normal. She said there's a lot of shelling, but our vineyards are just out of range of the rockets, so they can't be hit. But I can't imagine going and working in the vineyard and being 2 kilometers away from where a war is going on. That is dedication to these vines. This winery produces a lot of French, Italian, and Georgian wines. I got to enjoy their Telti Kuruk, which is actually an indigenous grape. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Plus an amphora aged orange wine made from Rakatsiteli, which is a Georgian wine. The other region we'll hit on really quick is Zakarpattia. This is the one that is the furthest west, so it is located on the border with Hungary and Slovakia. It is the furthest region from the areas that are occupied or at war. Zakarpattia has always been considered the land of white wines, but in recent years, thanks to lovely climate change, red varieties have also been ripening here. So it is the climate conditions of the region are favorable for grape growing. And two other wineries that import to the US can be found here. The first is Stakowski Wines, and this is actually a winery that was founded by former professional tennis player Sergei Stakowski. His defeat of Roger Federer at the Wimbledon in 2013 is considered one of tennis world's greatest upsets, but he launched Stakowski Wines with the 2018 vintage to prove that his countrymen could create delicious wine in Ukraine. And what's funny is he's actually quite a teetotaler, aka he did not drink alcohol early in his life or in his career, but he fell in love with wine after being invited to play for the Bordeaux team. He has since gone to the front lines when Russia launched the full-scale invasion in February 2022 and is currently still there, at least as of February of 2024. And his brother runs the winery. Other winery that you can find in the Zakarpattia region is Chateau Chizé, or at least these are the wineries that you can also get wine in the US. They import in. So Chateau Chizé, I couldn't find as much information about this, but they were founded in 1995, so they are one of the older wineries here. And the one wine that I could find from them, at least on Bottle Rocket, was a sparkling wine, which I think would be interesting to try. Okay, lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the grapes grown in Ukraine. This podcast is sponsored by Repour Wine Savers. Listen, I love wine, but that doesn't mean I want to drink a full bottle every night. You see, it's always a risk opening a bottle knowing I'll only have a glass or two. But now I don't worry about that at all because I have Repour. These little contraptions will keep your open bottles of wine good for up to 3 months by removing oxygen from the bottle using fancy chemistry. And they're so easy to use. I simply open a bottle of wine, cork or screw cap, just like normal, and enjoy my glass or two. Then, when I'm ready to call it a night, I rip the foil off my Repour wine saver and place it in the bottle in place of the cork or screw cap, and then stick the bottle in the fridge. Simple as that. Then, whenever I grab another glass from that bottle in the future, I just make sure to put the Repour back on as soon as I'm done pouring. It's that easy. Want to give Repour a try? Head to repour.com, REPOUR.com, and use code CORKANDFIZZ for 10% off your order. That's Repour, REPOUR.com, and use code CORKANDFIZZ. No spaces in that, and the and is spelt out, so it's CORKANDFIZZ. Once you have Repour, you'll never have to worry about opening a bottle of wine just for one glass. I mean, heck, now you can try 2 or more wines at the same time and have your own at-home wine tasting. This podcast is sponsored by the Cork Crew Virtual Wine Club. Interested in trying new wines, but not sure where to start? Or maybe you've been listening to this podcast for a while and you love the idea of tasting wine live with me. If that's you, come join my Cork Crew Virtual Wine Club, and you'll get to sip wine with me twice a month while I help you find new favorite wines. The Cork Crew is not your ordinary wine club. This is a community of people who are passionate about exploring new flavors, learning about different wine styles, and having fun along the way. And the best part about this club, purchasing the wine is completely optional. Plus, all events are recorded, and you have access to the full library of recordings as a Cork Crew member, so you can always catch up if you can't make it live. Oh, and did I mention it's virtual, which means you get to do all of this from the comfort of your sofa in your PJs. No need to worry about driving in crappy traffic, finding a designated driver, or spending an arm and a leg on a taxi. Want to give it a try without the commitment? You're in luck. Right now, I'm offering a free class pass to anybody who wants to try out the Cork Crew Virtual Wine Tasting Club. With this pass, you'll be able to join a Cork Crew event of your choosing. No strings attached. I don't need your credit card. I don't need you to sign up for anything. You'll be my guest. Simply head to corkandfizz.com/free class pass to get your class pass and be one step closer to becoming a member of the best wine tasting club around, the Cork Crew. I can't wait to see you there. Now let's get back to the show. So most of them are actually international varieties, aka they're not native to Ukraine. Some popular reds include Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Pinot Noir, and Saperavi. Then you have popular whites, including Aligote. If you've never heard of this, it's not super common, which is kind of funny, or not like funny, but like interesting that you find it here. If you ever heard me say white Burgundy is always Chardonnay, in the Burgundy region of France, they grow Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and that's pretty much it, except they also grow this white grape Aligote. They have to label it Aligote. They can't call it a white Burgundy if it's made of that grape, but Aligote is a white wine grown in Burgundy. So in the Ukraine, they have Aligote. They also have Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, Riesling, Traminer, and Rakatsiteli. Some Ukrainian wineries have also successfully grown and produced wines from Tempranillo, Cimarosso, Albarino, Pinotage, Zweigelt, and Blaufränkisch. However, there are also 4 indigenous grape varieties grown in Ukraine. They are Odessa Black, that is the one red indigenous varietal. Then the whites are Telti Kuruk, Citron Magarash, and Suklamanski White. So from what I can tell, the ones worth knowing are the first 2 that I mentioned. So Odessa Black and Telti Kuruk. Odessa Black was created in 1948 from the crossing of Alicante Bouschet and Cabernet Sauvignon. A lot of winemakers say it is a pain in the patootie to work with, but when you can get it to work, when you can tame it, it produces a dark, intense, fruity red wine. And then for the other one, the white grape, Telti Kuruk, this is a white indigenous grape that belongs to the group of varieties of the Black Sea Basin. I will say I'm putting a little caveat. I'm going to put a little star next to indigenous here because some articles that I read did believe that this grape could have actually originated in Turkey and then was brought over very early on to Ukraine. I believe it is only found in Ukraine now, and actually only in a couple vineyards. The name Telti Kuruk is named for its unusual foxtail shape of its grape bunch. It produces wines that are full-bodied with notes of minerality. If you would like to try Ukrainian wine, there are a couple ways to do this. So I wanted to share what I have found through my research, but definitely do your own as well and reach out to your local wine shop and see what they can find. There is a new US importer, so they bring in Ukrainian wine. It's called Vino Ukraini. It is VYNO space and then Ukraine, but with a Y at the end. So UKRAINY. And so they work with the New York, New Jersey-based distributor, Skurnik Wines, SKURNIK. You can find their website. I'll make sure to link everything in the show notes. But a lot of times so basically the way this works is that your wine shop can reach out to the distributor, Skurnik, to get some of these wines in their shop. So that would be a good way for them to do that. The shops that I have found it in so far, I believe they are both, well, the one is definitely in New York. Bottle Rocket, that is my partner that I work with for the Cork Crew. And so, but you can order online and they deliver throughout the US to most states, except for the ones that, you can't, you already know who you are. If you can order wine online. And then Art Wine was another one that I found. It looks like they have various locations across the US. If you are located in the EU, you can get wines from Ukraine.com. They have a far larger selection, so I highly recommend checking it out. And then for my Canadian listeners, I couldn't find a lot right now. So definitely keep asking and keep mentioning it. But I did find a couple at Sherbrooke Liquor. I hadn't heard of any of these winemakers, so I don't know how good the quality is, but I have no idea how common Sherbrooke Liquor is. I found it in Edmonton, Canada, but that might not be helpful at all. So definitely keep doing your research, keep asking for it, and yeah, hopefully you can find some. All right, well, that is your brief introduction to Ukrainian wine. Like I said, it is definitely worth a try. And of course, worth us continuing to talk about this region. that is going through and dealing with the war and the occupation. They still need our help. So do what you can to donate and spread the word. And then, of course, try their wine. Like, we might as well support those winemakers that are trying to continue to, make their wine and make their place in the world. There are a lot of stories out there about, a lot of these wineries had to actually work really hard to get their wines outside of the Ukraine. They even, I think at one point, they had I think it was the brother of Stokowski who took the wines, like a bunch of different wineries' wines, across the border, and then somebody put all their wines in a checked bag to fly them to the UK so they could be a part of either a judging or some type of wine conference so that people could try Ukraine wine. And I've tried 2 of them now, and I can tell you both of them were absolutely delicious, and I would very much recommend giving these a try. As always, if you know a wine lover in your life that would enjoy this podcast, please share it with them. Find your favorite episode and send it their way. Or you could take a screenshot right now, post it to your social media, and recommend people give it a listen. I would so appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I release new episodes every Wednesday. In next week's episode, I'll be sharing my top tips for storing wine. And if you're interested in trying new wines, just like these Ukrainian wines, and being a part of an amazing tasting group, come join my Cork Crew virtual tasting club. You don't need any wine experience, but of course, if you have some, you're always welcome. This is a perfect place for both beginners and experts the same. We all have a great time. You can try a tasting for free to see exactly what it's like. Just head to corkandfizz.com/free class pass. Cheers!